one of the things that we both share is love for entertainment. However, that differs a little bit, and you'll see some of that. What we decided to do is, since a lot of people are at home right now and they're looking for ways to entertain themselves because you don't have sports, don't have movies to go out and see, people are looking for something, is we'd make recommendations on movies of the past. And we thought that since there's certainly a preference for the 80s right now, we'd start with the year 1980. The problem is there were so many great movies. We're going to do it in 2 parts. So if we leave something out, it'll be in the next run. I was looking up some quick facts about 1980, and I thought it would be fun to go back and kind of repeat what those are, because you lose some of them over time. But 1980 was the year the Rubik's Cube came out.
Really?
Yeah. I thought that was kind of cool. Ted Turner came out with CNN, the first 24-hour news cable network. That was 1980. Pac-Man video game was released. That's when we had arcades and used to go and play stand-up video games.
Good old days.
Yeah. 350 million people worldwide turned into TV to I Dallas to find who shot JR. That was a big thing. Yeah.
Loved Dallas.
Okay, I admit, I watched the series about halfway through, and a few years later, I went back and watched the whole series. So,
no, you did not.
I did.
Did you put on Knots Landing just for good favor afterwards?
Yeah, Knots Landing never took with me. I'm sorry, but Dallas was pretty good. So, in 1980 was the year John Lennon was assassinated. He was 40 years. He was 40 years old. So not only was that 40 years ago, but he was 40 when it happened.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. I know. The average cost of a new house was $68,000.
Wow.
The average income per year was $19,500.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you're barely making it nowadays with $19,500. So.
Well, but houses aren't $67,000 either.
Monthly rent was $300.
Right. But again, annual salary was averaging $19,000.
Yeah. The cost of gas was $1.19 per gallon.
Wow.
Yeah. The hot car of the year was a Pontiac Firebird, and brand new, those were $6,000. Also, a big thing that year was the VHS recorder, which was $700 to purchase. I
do remember my parents bought, I think we were one of the only ones on the block that had a VHS, and it had like a leather case that had a handle in it.
Yeah.
We were like, what the hell is this thing? And I was hooked. As soon as they brought it in the house, I was like, put a movie in.
Yeah.
I was hooked. I was a movie nut. So.
Well, a little bit of a segue. The reason why I got so hooked on movies, well, I've always liked movies, but there where I was going to school and stuff like that, I'd moonlight at Blockbuster in Hollywood a few years later. And boy, I would love it when people would come in and say, hey, can you recommend a movie for me to watch? And well, tell me what kind of movies you like. And so they rattle off a couple of movies. Have you ever seen this? Because, I'm sure, as you'll see, I've seen just about everything. So admittedly, there are a few that I haven't seen, but yeah.
Well, let's keep in mind, in 1980, I was also like 4 years old.
I was a little bit older than that in 1980.
So like
you can tell by the gray.
Most of the movies that came out in 1980, I remember, but I watched them years later.
Which might mean different things, because I think the theatrical experience versus the home experience, a lot of people have a different likeness for the movie depending on how they saw it or who they saw it with or what kind of memory they have when they saw it.
Well, and it's true. And the other thing that's funny that's come up recently with me showing my kids movies that I've seen when I was little is movies that you had seen when you were younger and watched them and loved them, and then you watch them now and you still appreciate them. But if you never watched them as a kid, like movies like Airplane. Yeah. I tried to show that to my kid. He thought it was the dumbest thing ever. But I'm like, this movie's hilarious.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Red Zone is for unloading and unloading only.
Yeah, History of the World. History of the World Part 1. One of my favorites. Tried to show it to my kids. Totally didn't get it.
Well, so I think experience
Well,
how you see the movie is
hold on.
one thing.
Let me clarify that.
Yeah.
Because I only showed it to the older kid, given the fact of some of the content in History of the
Oh yeah.
Did not show it to the younger one.
Yeah, what, he's early teens right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'll tell you what age group I was in at the time I saw some of these movies, and it's gonna blow you away because what? Your parents let you watch that?
Well, it's not gonna
Yeah.
blow me away. I mean, I saw Poltergeist when I was like right when it came out, basically, and I was what? God, when did that come out? That's another one we should talk about. But yeah, I mean, I was before I was 10.
I saw all the Faces of Death movie before,
Right,
where I was 12.
Yeah, exactly. I remember we ordered Burger King, and we were sitting and eating Burger King, and I couldn't finish because we were watching Faces of Death. Why did I think this was a good idea?
I don't know.
I was a kid. I didn't know anything.
So let's start off with the big one that year. Empire Strikes Back, the second Star Wars movie.
My favorite of all time.
These movies were big in their time. They didn't have the number of movie theaters. So like Star Wars, you would stand in line for like 2 showings before you got into the movie theater. It was almost like going to an amusement park. But I can remember staying in line for the original Star Wars and also Empire Strikes Back.
I mean, I remember too, like thinking back to those movies just as a child, you know, I mean, again, I was 4, but I do remember the movie when it came out. For some reason, still just to this day, I do remember seeing it.
Yeah.
And what's funny is the other thing I remember is that back then you would go into a McDonald's, a Burger King, whatever, and they had tie-ins to this movie. So it was everywhere. Everybody had the lunch boxes with the Ewoks, or not the Ewoks, the Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker on them and all that stuff. And like they had all of these merchandise that they had to have. I mean, as a kid, I wanted to have the lunchbox. I wanted to have the backpack. I got to have the figures. It was different than it seems to be now. And that's the part that's kind of sad and interesting to me. I just remember the tie-ins and the marketing and the merchandising, just everything. And it was crazy because we all had it. Every friend of mine had a Star Wars set, and it wasn't considered nerdy. It wasn't considered anything like that. It's just that's what everyone had.
I will share some nerdyism. So I had the Star Wars, the first movie, before it was called A New Hope. I had Star Wars on a record, and I had a turntable in my room, and I would listen to the movie. Because I basically had the full audio of the entire movie. I just didn't have the video because, you know, videos were kind of expensive at that time, but I would play that all the time. I had that and look at the pictures while I was listening to it and stuff like that. That was pretty nerdy. Had my little action figures and stuff like that. So anyway, Empire Strikes Back. So cult classic, I would definitely say yes. What do you say?
Oh, for sure.
In your opinion, has it aged?
I think it definitely has aged. I think it still stands up. I mean, my kids still love that movie, and I can't think of any generation that hasn't appreciated that one specifically. It is a little more darker tone than the others at that time.
Well, it's my favorite out of the 9 movies.
Same.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I would say it holds up as well. As far as a rating, if we used a 1 to 7 scale on these, so 7 being the best, 1 being the least. I know a lot of people use 1 to 10, but I wanted to pick something that had a midpoint. So, so I would give this the highest rating. I'd give it a 7. I saw it multiple times in the theater. I've quoted the movie many, many times. I own it. I watch it every few years. The rewatchable factor is pretty high. What about you?
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Highest rating. I've seen it. I can't even tell you how many times. Quoted it, bought the figures, like the whole thing, the whole 9.
What would you say is your favorite part of the movie? Because it was a big movie.
I honestly would tell you that, and this, I don't know if this is cliche or stupid or whatever. I don't care. I mean, I think it's just the fact that it was a darker, more real. Um, you kind of get more personally. I felt like you get more out of the characters in that movie. You start to find out the truth about the Skywalker saga. You start to find out more about the emotions behind the characters. You start to see more of more depth, I guess you'd say. Plus, like I said, the tone is darker, and I just tend to like those. It's one of the reasons why I like the newer Batman franchise as opposed to previous iterations.
Well, I would agree with you 100%. But it's probably the same thing I liked. It was more real. I think when they add a little bit of camp to it, that part kind of loses me a little bit. Like the Ewoks. I think Return of the Jedi is a great movie. I'm just not a big fan of the Ewoks. Not that they aren't cute or anything like that. It's just it kind of took some of this. If you just took them out of the movie and you played the movie, I think that's an excellent movie. But I understand that you're trying to sell products and stuff too. So, but that's one of the reasons why I like Empire Strikes Back. Is the same reason, is it just felt more serious, more real. Yeah.
I mean, the Tauntaun scene, like. Yeah, still in my brain.
And I thought they smelled bad on the outside.
Like, whoa, those were so awesome. And that whole Battle of Hoth scene, it was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like the big Yeti monster, so.
Yeah. Right.
I know some people are going to crucify me because I don't know the actual name of it. I forget. I'm sorry, so.
It's fine. Not judging you.
Okay. Second movie. You want to go ahead?
Well, I've already talked about it a little bit, but yeah, Airplane, one of my all-time favorites. My brother and I were very close, and we used to watch a lot of movies together. And this is one that my brother and my cousin, we used to just watch, and we would. I can't even tell you how many times we would quote this movie. I mean, still to this day, a lot of people quote this movie. I mean, they use it.
When Kramer hears about this shit's gonna hit the fan.
Good luck. We're all counting on you.
Roger. Over under.
There's so many, and it's a classic in my house. But like I said, I mean, my kids, the ones that I have an older boy who's 24, going to be 25. He saw it and was like, "Yeah, it's okay." Thought it was kind of dumb.
We got to get her to a hospital. What is it? Well, it's a large building where they help people.
Yeah, but that's not important right now. But my younger, he didn't really appreciate it as much, and that's fine. But to me personally, it's definitely a classic. It's something that's a staple since I've been a kid. That's not only been a movie that I watch and laugh at, but something that I've also used in my everyday life with quotes and just something I do. My brother and I talk to each other on the phone or in video conference. We still will say lines from the movie. Same with my cousin. Same with some of my friends. It's still something that stays with me after all these years.
I was talking to somebody not too long ago, and we were just kind of chatting about, fathers and sons and how some relate to one another through sports and different, like communal interests and stuff like that. But a lot of friends, they use movie quotes. They use moments that either brought them joy or that they really liked and stuff like that. So I would probably agree with that. I've quoted Airplane lots. I mean, the fascinating thing about this movie, it was made on a $3.5 million budget, and it made $158 million in the theaters. So it was really successful, especially for Paramount. So,
well, and I think too, I don't know that this movie, I mean, forget some of the humor that was used in it that was off color and, totally get that at the time it was taken differently. But if they were to try to use something like that today, they've done this sort of with Scary Movie and stuff like that.
Yeah. But
it's just not the same.
Yeah.
It's just,
it definitely was a parody movie. And you got to remember in the late 70s, we're TV and movies and stuff did a lot of disaster movies. And so this was kind of a parody of a disaster movie. Robert Hayes, Julie Haggerty, Liam Neeson. It's had a lot of different stars in the time that were pretty big. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Peter Graves. I mean, some of these people went on to do a lot of other things, but God, it's a great movie, and I don't think it holds up because you're right. There's a lot of racial things or different things that were taken differently at that time.
Well, even was it Sonny Bono gets on the plane with a bomb, right?
Yeah.
He goes and buys the parts at the airport. Like, yeah, that's hilarious. But after 9/11, is it still funny? I don't know. I thought it was funny, but
or all the religious people with the pamphlets in the airport. He's going through.
Yeah, I mean, and then it was a Robert Stack that walked through and beat the crap out of everybody in the airport.
It's great. Okay, so rating. I want to give it a 7. I liked it. I'd watch it again. I recommend it. I'd just give it a 6.
I'm gonna give it a 7. I own it. I own both Airplane movies. Big fan. Loved it as a kid. It's like Star Wars. I mean, I'm not saying it's the same, but it's similar in my life that it's stayed with me after all these years.
So the next movie that we have up is Stir Crazy. This is again a comedy starring Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor, both comedians of that era. It had a $10 million budget. It made $101 million at the theaters. Just a great fun movie. What did you think about it?
So I've seen this. It's been a long time. I love Gene Wilder. I love Richard Pryor. I don't really remember a lot about them because it's been so long since I've seen it. I mean, I probably haven't seen it since the 80s. I'll tell you the one thing that I do remember about the movie is when Richard Pryor goes, "That's right, we bad.
Yeah. Yeah. This movie was probably not as quoted as much. They played in several movies together, and this is one of the more memorable ones. So Stir Crazy, I would give a solid 6 to. I think it holds up over time. It's worth a watch, especially if you're looking for something fun.
Anything Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor is worth watching. I mean, I truly believe that. I mean, even if most would consider it a terrible movie, I would say that those two had great chemistry.
So what would you give it?
Well, I guess for me, the problem is I don't really remember it, and it's been so long.
Okay.
I mean, to be honest, probably a 4 or 5, just because I do remember.
Okay.
I do remember some of the movie, just not the whole thing. And I remember just laughing most of the time when those two were together. And that pains me because I want to give anything Pryor a 6 or a 7.
Yeah.
Or Wilder, for that matter.
Okay, how about the next one?
Well, so 9 to 5, great movie. Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, Dolly Parton. So I remember this movie pretty well. I watched this movie a lot. I don't know why. I really don't. I just remember as a kid, the song was huge. Yeah. The song is the one thing, when I see the poster, I sing it in my head. You know, and it's a movie that I can still remember. I remember everything because I watched it so many times. There were certain movies as a kid that I just was drawn to, and I still don't even remember why. I just loved it. Yeah. And this was one of them. The concept was lost on me about 3 women who were being treated like crap in a male-dominated business world. I mean, I was a kid. I didn't really get what that meant, but I loved what they were doing. I kind of got why they I figured the guy was a bully. They were getting him back, right? I didn't really take any big picture from that, but that was what I liked, and I thought that was cool. And so I just remember laughing. I thought Dolly Parton was hot, obviously, which probably doesn't play well into the whole feminist reason behind the movie, which I thought was cool.
I love the scene where they get pulled over by the cop and they got the dead body in the trunk. Or when they leave the dead body in the bathroom. Hey, we got another stiff in the John. I mean, there were some very good classic parts in that movie. So
the dream sequences were always funny.
Oh yeah, they were fun. This was a 20th Century Fox movie. If anybody wants to catch it, I believe it's playing on Stars right now. This certainly made its money. I mean, $10 million budget, $103 million at the theaters. This was a very good movie. It's worth a watch. It's lost nothing over time for somebody that enjoyed it back then. So not sure that people today would really identify with it as much. So younger people, kids.
We get it.
Okay. So, you know what? I just realized we forgot to rate a 9 to 5. What would you give it?
Oh, 9 to 5. I'd give it definitely a 6 or a 7. I do own it.
I'd give it a 6. So yeah. I'm generous in my movie scores, just so you know, because I love movies. So,
well, I think the truth of the matter is, just to do a little quick side note, when it comes to movies, the reality is that while there are people out there paid to like rip it apart for everything, and that's fine, it's entertainment, and entertainment for people can be abstract. Some people get one thing out of it, some people get another thing out of it. For me, was I entertained? Did I get what I wanted out of it? And I learned some things from it maybe too. I'm okay with that as well. So I'm definitely generous, but it's not just because I love movies. It's just like, did it do what it was supposed to, what I paid for? Did I get what I paid for? Just like any other consumer product. I paid money for this. Did I get what I wanted out of it? No? Okay, cool. This is what I'm going to say.
I rate movies only for the entertainment factor most of the time. So the next movie is Any Which Way You Can. Did you see this movie?
I did see it, but like Stir Crazy, I only remember parts of it. So my dad was a huge fan of this movie. So I remember he watched it, and I happened to watch it with him, but I kind of really wasn't watching a whole lot. So for this one, I don't really have a whole lot to offer. I know the premise and I get what happened, but I couldn't go into detail. Other than that.
This was my dad was a big Clint Eastwood fan, and so I learned to like Clint through my dad. It was something that we shared together. So this was a Warner Brothers movie. It had pretty good returns. It was a $15 million budget, $70 million at the theater. It's a story about a street fighter. He's kind of at the end of his street fighting career, and he gets set up for a big fight. I've seen this one a few times. It's branded as an action comedy. I'd probably give it a 5.
Well, let me ask this question. This brings up an interesting thing. Would you have liked it if your dad wasn't as huge of a fan?
I've seen it several times without my dad.
No, I
saw it the first one with my dad. But
here's the thing that's interesting to me too, because I think about this when I was a kid. Charles Bronson was somebody my dad watched. I remember as a kid, like, oh wow, yeah, Charles Bronson. This guy's a badass. And I remember watching those movies, thinking to myself, how is this guy badass? You see Sylvester Stallone.
Kind of like John Wayne, I don't think it's being all that tough.
He's got a killer right hook, and he always can get it off at the right time. Like,
well, I don't know there, Sally.
Right. And that's cool, but then at some point I was kind of like, I mean, I like Charles Bronson a lot, to be honest with you. I thought he was cool. I thought he was definitely one of those guys where it's like most men could see themselves in Charles Bronson, whereas Stallone's like, he's bigger than life.
Yeah.
Which, whole side note, I mean, Stallone is a god in my house, but you see somebody like that, and I can't really relate to him. I'll watch him. I'm entertained by him. I love his movies. But I can relate to some of his characters, but him as a person, you see Charles Bronson, he's just a regular looking guy. And so it's like, oh, okay, I can see that. But Clint Eastwood was kind of like that with Stallone almost to me. So like I watch him in his movies, and he plays some really good characters that I think are relatable. But I think just him as a person, it's just he's larger than life.
All right, let's eat through them real quick. Private Benjamin, Warner Brothers movie, $15 million budget, $70 million at the theaters. Goldie Hawn was a comedy. She's a wealthy 28-year-old Jewish woman. Her in the military. She kind of finds out who she is through the whole process. I think this is a good movie for some people that are in that kind of phase where they've never really met themselves, and they kind of put a little bit of a comedic spin on it. I saw it a few times. I did not see it in the theater, so I saw it, on video or cable. it was a decent movie. I could kind of take it or leave it. So I'll drop it in the 4 range. If you haven't seen it enough to rate it, that's okay. You don't have to.
Well, and it's sad because I love Goldie Hawn. I mean, I'm a huge. I always thought her movies were really good.
Seems like old times, and all those kind of stuff.
Yeah, Wildcats, Overboard. Love Kurt Russell. Huge Kurt Russell fan. So when I think back, I just remember some of her earlier stuff. I don't really remember a whole lot of it. It was more of the later stuff that I remember more about those movies.
Coal Miner's Daughter was kind of a biographical musical movie. So if that's not your forte, then this is hard. So it tells the story of Loretta Lynn. I'm not a country fan, so I did watch this probably once or twice. It didn't really take with me. It did make good money at the theaters. It was Universal Studios. I think movies about singers and stuff are kind of interesting, but I always leave wondering how much of that is true and not dressed up for the movie, right?
I think for me, so I will say this much: I do remember some of the movie. My mom watched it. She loves Sissy Spacek, and I actually do too. She was one of my favorites, actually. In 4 Christmases, I really liked her. But anyway, movies about musicians holds a special place in my heart because I'm a failed musician.
Yeah.
I watch any movie about Walk the Line, Dennis Quaid, Jerry Lee Lewis. Any of those movies, I'm always going to watch and be infatuated with. I mean, even just going back to what was that movie I just watched? The Green Book was another good one. Great movie. So, I mean, just movies about musicians to me just hold a special place in my heart. So I can tell you that watching this as a kid didn't really have the same weight that some of them now do because I wasn't really in that. I hadn't really gone through that phase of my life of music.
Okay, so the next one is Smokey and the Bandit 2. Currently on Stars. We just recently lost Burt Reynolds. That's tragic. I liked a lot of his stuff. If you like his comedy style, Smokey and the Bandit, the first one was a big one. So this was the sequel, Universal Studios. Again, it's playing on Stars right now. Burt Reynolds, Sally Field, Jerry Reed, Jackie Gleason. I'd give this one a 5.
So I definitely would say that the first and the second one still hold about the same amount of water with me now as they did then.
But would you really recommend it to people and think that they would get it because maybe they don't cherish it like you do because you obviously have memories around a certain time, different stars and stuff like that. So
I think a lot of people who recommend movies do it for personal, they have a personal reason why something hit them, right? Somebody sees a movie and there's something that in the movie that triggers them, whether it's, something really personal or just something they thought was cool. And what they might think is cool or hit them personally might not resonate with somebody else. So I think people still are, I'd recommend this to somebody who's a movie buff who maybe never got to see the movies from back then, with legendary actors in their heyday. I would absolutely recommend this. I would kind of give the caveat of, well, it's kind of dated. Some things might not hit, but I still thought it was funny enough or a good movie for the time. And if you can watch it appreciating that, then it might resonate. But I wouldn't recommend this to somebody who's 20 years old.
So what score would you give this movie?
I'd give this definitely a 6.
All right, cool. The Blue Lagoon, Warner Brothers. Christopher Atkins, Brooke Shields.
Where my Brooke Shields crush started for sure.
Let's see. I got an honorable mention from somebody in the house, so it's obviously listening in. But this is a romantic survival drama. It's 2 kids. They're on a boat, and the boat gets caught in a tropical storm or something, and the kids wash up on a beach, and they kind of learn to fend for themselves, and they grow up together, and then they reach puberty, they fall in love, and so this is start of the chick flick.
That is the worst intro of a movie ever.
No, you know what? I did. Okay,
No.
so I did like this movie.
Good movie.
The rewatchability factor for me has not been high. However, I did rewatch it probably within the last 2 years, and it held up pretty well. It's a period. It's a period piece, so I don't think I think it dates just fine. But it talks about a lot of the societal, emotional, and physical changes of the characters and stuff like that. I think that's all valuable. I think it's still relevant today. And if you like kind of a Swiss Family Robinson, Robinson Crusoe, any kind of like somebody, I think that part you would really enjoy. I think a lot of people enjoy the romantic parts as well. I think the character journeys are pretty good. I would actually recommend this one, even though it's not high on my rewatchability factor. I've probably seen it 3-4 times. How about you?
Probably about the same amount. I mean, I would say that the one thing about this movie that does hold up is it's a story that's been retold several iterations over throughout movies, even since then, where two people are stranded on an island and end up being together. And story of how those characters grow from beginning to end. I mean, there's B-rated movies that talk about this. It's retold constantly. And I dug it. I thought it was a great movie. I love Brooke Shields, especially at the time. I was a young kid. I was like, oh, she's pretty. So I remember thinking to myself, you kind of wonder, like, how would I handle this situation? It's definitely a movie that is still relatable because it's about basically stripping away everything and going to nothing. And then, you have the hormones and the emotional changes that kids go through and stuff like that. That's totally relatable to everybody.
So what kind of score would you give it?
I mean, I definitely give this one probably I'll say a 5 because I'll say a 5 only because I haven't, it's not something that I quote or I still think about often. And it's definitely not one I've watched recently.
I think you put the words right in my mouth. But I definitely would recommend it to people.
Blues Brothers. This
all right.
Definitely a classic. The Blues Brothers is a movie. So here's the funny thing. As a kid, I didn't appreciate a lot of the comedy in this. I liked the music aspect of it. I was a huge Belushi and Aykroyd fan as a kid just because I thought they were funny, the two of them. I mean, Dan Aykroyd is an actor that I've grown up watching. I mean, he's right up there with me with like Robin Williams, John Candy, like all of those guys. He's definitely up there. I didn't get to appreciate as much of Belushi, more so his brother. But this was a movie that I've watched over and over again. I don't know. It definitely stood the test of time with me.
I think it's currently playing on Stars, released by Universal Studios. Made about 3 times its budget in the theaters. It's branded as a musical comedy. It was adapted from SNL characters on Saturday Night Live, which has been done many, many times, but I think this was one of the earlier versions of it. Good movie. This is one of the ones that I would say has been branded a classic.
Yeah. I mean, so this is a movie I've rewatched up until even recently. I think it's probably been about 5 years since I've seen it. So fairly recent, but not like yesterday. The thing is I think this movie holds up with the racial undertones that are discussed in there and the racism that's discussed in there and some of the other things that are in there as far as, and then just even the comedic aspect of it with Aykroyd and Belushi. I mean, those guys are awesome. The chemistry those two had is one of those, Laurel and Hardy's that stand the test of time. So I think that I would definitely give this one a 7 because it's stuck with me over all these years.
I gave it a 5. So next movie is Altered States. I admit this is something I only saw once or twice. It's a Warner Brothers movie. William Hurt, Blair Brown. It did not really make its money back. So it's a horror science fiction movie. I mean, this is a good movie. it just wasn't my movie. So I can't tell you why it wasn't mine. I've never been a super William Hurt fan, although I highly respect and like a lot of movies that he's in. He's just not somebody that I would go to the movies just because he's in it.
Well, back then, wouldn't he be considered one of those big draws?
Yeah. Well, yeah. He was in a lot of movies.
Probably for people who were older than you at the time.
Yeah. I think so.
But I don't remember a whole lot of this movie, so I'll be blunt. Sorry to all the actors involved. The only reason I rented this and watched it was later in life, and it was literally sitting on the rack, and I was like, it looks interesting, and I think I got that, and oh gosh, what was the other one? I think I got that in Cujo because I was onto a horror movie kick. But the only reason, and no offense to William Hurt, the only reason I grabbed it, I was a huge Drew Barrymore fan, had a crush on her for decades. So I grabbed it. I'm like, why not? I was, 7 or 8 at the time when I finally saw it. So it was 84 when Firestarter came out, and I was like,
yeah,
she's about my age.
So essentially, he plays a psychopathologist, and he's studying schizophrenia and begins to think that other states of consciousness are as real as our waking states. So this explores it. So I think at the time, this movie was probably a little bit more than what my interests were. And so it never really latched on. I was probably a little bit too young to grasp all the concepts. I'd probably think it was probably more interesting now than I did when I saw it.
So what was your age in 1980? Just so we understand for context.
No, I'm not telling that.
Oh, come on.
I was 11.
Okay, yeah. So I was 4, you were 11. So so we need that for context as we talk about what we saw and what we remember, because 4 some of these movies I saw when I was 11. So yeah, I think that it's just interesting when we think. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. So the next one is American Gigolo. Currently playing on Prime Video. I rewatched it because as I was going through this list, I'm like, oh, geez, I haven't seen that in a while. And the soundtrack is done by Blondie, which I liked back in the 80s. I think it was Richard Gere's early movies, had Lauren Hutton. But anyway, he's a male escort. He comes romantically involved with a politician's wife, and he gets set up for murder, and it's all about him trying to get out of the setup, and he gets humbled from the experience. But I did have some fun memories of it. However, it never had a huge rewatchability factor with me.
So my experience watching it, I haven't watched it since the first time I watched it. And I remember the reason I watched it was, so I remember Officer and Gentleman. I loved that movie. Mm-hmm. Louis Gossett Jr. and
you would.
That was awesome. Thought it was great. I mean, the fight scene between the two of them I thought was so badass at the time. And just Richard Gere's character as being a bullied kid who learns how to fight and just beats the crap out of everybody. And just his whole story, like I really dug it. I connected with it on some levels too, and I thought it was awesome. But my point is, going back to this movie, the only reason I watched it was I had seen that movie already. And so I was like, oh, well, all right, it's got Richard Gere, it's got sex. I'm young. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, you were really young.
Well, I mean, I didn't see it when it came out. I'm talking years later, but I was still too young to watch a movie like this, but I happened to see it. And I remember just thinking, this is an Officer and a Gentleman. I turned it off and had the desire to go back and watch it. I've never... I mean, unfortunately, and that's the thing. So I was a fan of Richard Gere after Officer and Gentleman. I loved a lot of his movies through the 80s and 90s. But this was one I was like, I can give it a take, and I don't really care.
Yeah. Well, I can say this was one of the first mainstream movies that had a full frontal male nudity in it. So, yeah.
Was it this one or the Stallone one?
When I was doing some research on it, it says it was one of the first mainstream Hollywood films to include full frontal male nudity from its main star.
Yeah, interesting.
So, yeah. Anyway, so what would you give it?
Yeah, 2.
I'd give it a 4. Take it or leave it. So, okay, you want to go over the next one?
Brubaker. Don't remember it. Don't even
That's okay. I do, and this stars Robert Redford, 20th Century Fox movie. Did decently at the theater. He's basically the prison warden, and he comes in acting as an inmate, and he attempts to clean up the corrupt, violent penal system at the time, because this is at a time towards the end of I'll call it the good old boy network in some of our prisons. It kind of shines a lot on some of the corruption with some of the guards and some of the inmates. It's one of the early prison drama movies, I think, out there. I rewatched it sometime in the last 2-3 years, and it held up really well. And it's a good movie. It does leave you with a very somber feeling, but and you can see a lot of the politics involved with what he's dealing with, because he eventually comes out and says, I'm the warden, and then he tries to clean things up, and he's dealing with a lot of resentment from people inside, both in the prisoners and the some of the guards, and then some of the other people, because there was like the good old boy network, you had Farmer Joe that was using prison labor for next to nothing, and you were shuttling money through different hands, and he was trying to clean that all up. So it is based, I think, on a true story. So I would actually recommend this movie. If anybody likes like prison drama kind of stuff, I would highly recommend this movie. It's worth a watch.
I'll have to check it out. I never saw it. I don't even remember anything about it. Just because probably my age, and
it's not something I put on a regular rotation. It's probably something I watch every 6 years or so. Yeah. But it is a good movie, and I would recommend it.
Well, so to be fair to the movies that I've rated that I don't really remember or never saw, I'm not going to rate it because I don't have enough to give it a rating.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even have anything to give it a rating. So
that's okay. I would give it a 5. Glad I saw it. I would recommend it. I don't own it. I didn't see it in the theater. I did see it on cable, and I've seen it several times when I could watch it for free.
Okay, well, let's go to the next one. This is one I'm definitely going to start out with.
Big cult classic.
So, Caddyshack.
Mm-hmm.
Caddyshack is another one that my family absolutely loves. Even my kids laughed at some of the parts of it, even though most of it is dated. There's a lot of it that's dated but the music is awesome. The comedy is classic. All legends in there. I mean, Dangerfield kills it. Murders it. Love it. And Ted Knight and him me and my friends still quote that movie today. We'll play those characters and go back and forth. Everything.
Go back there and tell the chef this is low-grade dog food.
Yeah. All of it. It's just it still holds water today with me and my friends and my family. I mean, we still quote this movie. I still watch this movie regularly.
Mm-hmm.
I still like the music. So I'm definitely going to give this movie a 7. Even though some of it's probably dated, it's probably stupid humor to a lot of people. I don't care. This movie holds water with me, and I absolutely love it.
I agree. I would also give it a 7. Fantastic movie. Also, there's a thing out there, and I believe it's on, I don't know which of the streaming services, but there's like a making of Caddyshack. I highly suggest watching that.
It was great.
It's very, very interesting. It was neat to see how a beloved movie was made and how many things just accidentally fell into place. I think a lot of the best movies are like that. They almost accidentally become awesome.
Yeah, it was so good.
Okay, so we're going to kind of wrap things up. We kind of gave you a part 1 of 1980. We thought we would go through it. We'd share from a fan's point of view.
The truth of the matter is, even though a movie might seem stupid or campy or overdone for a critic, that's what I'm going for when I go to see it. I want to see something stupid. I see enough seriousness in the world right now. I need something to take me away from that. So I'm going there to see those movies, something that's way beyond what it should be. Maybe an actor who is taking himself a little too seriously that I might find hilarious and want to go see him do that again. So I think it's important to remember that, you know, while the critics are out there and they have their thing, and that's not to say anything bad about any of them, the truth of the matter is most of the movies that the critics like, I tend to not care about.
Yeah. So in summary of 1980 Part 1, we both highly recommend Empire Strikes Back. Airplane was a favorite for both of us. It's a high watch. Blues Brothers, obviously recommended. I think you can see it right now in Stars. And Caddyshack is a cult classic. And I certainly recommend the making of watching it as well. So if you get a chance, take a look at that.
Absolutely.
We're gonna try to get together for a part 2 sometime soon. We'd love to get any kind of comments as far as what you thought we did well, what you'd like to see more of. Do you like more descriptions of the movies themselves? So please give us some feedback. One quick public service announcement from me is, as you know, I'm coming out with the first ever comic audiobook, Eclipse. If you look at some of the other YouTube videos I've done, you can probably see the trailer on that. I'd certainly like your support, and certainly enjoy it if you pass it around. So please like, subscribe, and share this with your friends. Haggard, do you have anything else?
Yeah. Can we do something about your internet connection, your Motorola Razr internet connection?
Okay, so here's the story. As I live out in the country, and this is the best that CenturyLink can do. So I'm waiting for the Skylink network being made by Elon Musk, so that I can get some decent power. Because the reason why I don't live stream more is because my connection does suck. So
Just saying.
just saying.
For me, it's always good talking with Spark. We should probably explain to the users, or not the users, the subs, where our names come from.
Yeah. Okay.
Because otherwise, I'm gonna be like, who the hell is Spark and Haggard?
You want to go first?
So when I first met Spark, it was through a video game back in early 2000s called City of Heroes, and I was new to the MMO world, so I bought it. I was at Target. So, this looks cool. I remember loading it, installing it, and then it came to the character creation screen and it said, "What's your name?" And I thought to myself, I don't know. I've never been good at that. I don't know how to come up with some cool superhero name. Well, I was a huge fan of Jackass at the time, and I owned a VHS of the movie Haggard that Bam Margera and those guys from Jackass had made, called Haggard. And so I was like, that sounds cool. So I put Haggard up there, and that was my first character in City of Heroes, Haggard. And that's how we got to know each other, and that became my handle ever since then. Even though I know it means ugly. What are you going to do?
Yes, we met. City Heroes was a game that I played too. My first character was named Spark Demon. It was an electric bubbler defender, force field bubble. When I joined a clan, a team, that's when we met. You know, people would just call me Spark or Spark Demon or Sparky, and it kind of took on a nickname, and it kind of stuck anyway because, you know, sometimes my personality is a little fiery. I think in a fun way, but
of course you think it's a fun way.
You know, one of the things I can say about meeting somebody in a game is we got to know each other as personalities first, and so, you know, having conversations and hours of gameplay and stuff like that. By the time that we actually saw each other and met in real life, you know, all the other crap to this, all the judgments and stuff that you make when you meet people were set aside. I felt like I already know this guy. He's like a brother to me. And we've known each other for years and years and years now. And
what, 15, 16 years ago?
Oh, God, I don't know how long.
Long time.
My real name's Michael. But Haggard and I also started Comic Works online. Well, actually, I actually started it. He jumped in it, and you can still see our trailer online because we lost the password for that YouTube site. So we couldn't get back into it for me to use. So I started a new one. But what that was putting comics in a digital, selling comics in a digital format online. And we got scooped to market by Comixology by just a little bit, and their pockets were much deeper than ours. But boy, I'll tell you what, that would have been exciting to do. So
yeah, we could probably do a whole nother segment on that journey for sure.
Yeah, that would be fun to talk about
The
sometime.
experience at Comic-Con.
So we're going to put this up 1980 part 1. We're going to do part 2, or we're going to try to do a few other years. If we get some feedback, if we get some traction, we'll probably keep going through this through the 80s, or maybe we'll pick a different century. Maybe we'll jump to 1990, maybe 2000. I learned a lot kind of preparing for this. So
there's still a lot to go through for the 80s. That's for dang sure.
Yeah. The 80s was it was a neat era because there were so many different studios. Now you got everybody kind of bought up. Yeah. You don't have a lot of these like small run kind of Caddyshack kind of classics coming out anymore. Everything's either a big blockbuster or it's a kind of an arts noir kind of movie. There aren't as many of these smaller, like little test market kind of movies anymore, in my opinion. Anyway, thank you very much. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you all later.